Hello to my Evergals, my people. Welcome back to the show. I'm so happy that you guys have been enjoying the solo episodes. I want to always bring you as much value as possible, so I will keep bringing you solo episodes for as long as you want them. I thought what would be really helpful right now is if we talk a little bit about productivity. With fall comes that fresh, back to school energy that kind of brings this new motivation and excitement to our careers. In summer, we're typically less productive. So I feel like right now is a really good time to refresh, get newly motivated, and corporate baddies go off. I have interviewed a lot of the most successful women, finance experts, entrepreneurs, millionaires, founders of billion-dollar companies. So you kind of have to be a dummy to not be able to pick up some of their productivity. So I feel like I've learned a lot about optimizing productivity from people that I've interviewed, and I kind of just have to. I basically have two full-time jobs running this podcast and managing and editing all of the content in the wellness section on theeverygirl.com, and I also am seeing some coaching clients. So she's a busy gal, but who isn't? We all deserve to maximize our time, feel our best at work, not get burnt out, and just feel on top of our game. Little FYI, these are not your typical productivity tips. I'm not going to be talking about like the Pomodoro method, which, by the way, if you don't know, okay, fine, I'll talk about it. The Pomodoro method is 25 minutes of work and then a 5-minute break. I find that that's really helpful sometimes if I need to focus, but I'm having a hard time getting into it. But I think there's so many little hacks like that. Like, sure, they're helpful, but it's not going to change your life. This episode is tackling productivity at the root. We are getting deep. I don't want this to feel like a bunch of like tricks and routines that you have to add to your already busy lifestyle. I want it to be like taking a look at your productivity from the foundation and making adjustments from the ground up. I have 5 tips, and then I will share my personal productivity routine, what I do every week, and that includes how I cycle sync my productivity because I'm extra like that. Productivity tip number 1. You guys, we have got to start training our brains to focus on one thing at a time. It is no secret or surprise that as social media and technology increases, our productivity and focus decreases. We have so many freaking distractions, so many sources of like quick, easy, addicting dopamine hits. It's like, of course, we're not productive. Of course, we have energy crashes and can't focus. Our world is setting us up for failure, but we are not doomed. We have control over our lives. You have to train your brain, work your brain to focus on one thing at a time. For example, how often are you scrolling through your phone while you're also watching TV? What you're doing in that moment is you're training your brain to only feel comfortable with that extreme dopamine release of 2 different stimulants at once. This translates to our brain not being able to focus for a long period of time when we're brainstorming or we're working on a project. Calming your mind and using that like tunnel vision is a skill that we have to be working on to increase our productivity. So basically, multitask less. If you're in an elevator or waiting in line, resist the urge to pull out your phone and scroll. Allow yourself just to be focusing on the task of waiting for the elevator doors to open up or waiting for the line to move. With work, because our brain is so trained to be this multitasking machine that it is not meant to be, most of us are constantly stopping tasks to check our phones or we check our inbox. This is harming our capability to focus and to get into the flow state. So something I've been doing is setting designated times to check my inbox instead of like consistently checking throughout the day so that I'm being intentional about when I'm checking my inbox rather than it being like a default automatically go to my inbox when I need a quick like brain break, and also being really aware of where I'm trying to focus on more than one thing at a time, which sometimes is unavoidable. And also sometimes it doesn't have to be bad. Sometimes that's good to have 2 different things at once. I love listening to music while I'm cooking, or I love calling my mom while I'm taking a walk. Like multitasking can obviously help us be productive. I love a good habit stack, but the problem happens when we're training our brain to not be able to focus on one thing at a time. So resist the urge to take your phone out all the time, make yourself complete one task before going to another, and really view focusing on one thing at a time as a skill that you have to practice. Productivity tip number 2, rethink the 24-hour day by splitting up the day into 3 different days. I first heard this tip from Ed Milet, and for a while it was very confusing to me. I was like, I don't get this. And once it kind of like clicked, It really helped me rethink how I'm spending my time, how I'm thinking of productivity. So I'm going to try to explain it in a way that makes sense for you. So instead of looking at your normal day as this 24-hour block, every morning when you wake up, you think, I have 3 full days ahead of me before I go to sleep again. That first day is from 6 a.m. to noon. The second day is from noon to 6 p.m. And then the third day is from 6 p.m. to midnight. There are a few different reasons that this can be effective for productivity, and they all have to do with mindset. You know how a bad morning can mess up your whole day? Like if you were not productive, or you scrolled too much, or you ate foods that didn't make you feel good, or you skipped your workout, you kind of feel like, what's the point for the rest of the day? This day is a wash. So I'll just not be productive, or I'll not work, or I'll order takeout. You may feel like the day is already ruined. But if you think of it like your next day starts at noon, you wouldn't want to have back to back days that didn't feel productive or good for you. So you want the day that begins at noon and goes until 6 p.m. to feel super productive and feel super good, rather than ruining another 6 hours just because you didn't feel good about the last 6 hours. I also like this reframe because we often think that there is one specific time during our 24-hour days. So, for example, you work 8 hours for the day, you exercise for 1 hour, you maybe meditate for 30 minutes, and then maybe spend an hour or two with friends, or watch TV for 3 hours. When we're thinking of it as a 24-hour day, there's like this checklist that we have to go through. But if each day was shorter, you would accomplish so much more. You would fit these different categories of your life throughout the 6 hours instead of throughout the 24-hour period. So in each 6 hour block, you would somehow move rather than thinking, my one time to move is my hour-long workout that's at 5 p.m. Maybe it's not going to be like an hour-long workout every 6 hour block, but during the first day, the first 6 hour block, you go for a walk, and then you have your gym time in the noon to 6 p.m. block. And then 6 p.m. to midnight block, you have a stretch. You think of like, how can I check this off in each of these days instead of waiting for the 1 hour in your entire 24-hour block to get movement in? And imagine how differently you would show up with this mindset. Maybe you would also be a lot more present with your significant other in the mornings if you weren't looking at it like, I'm going to be present with them this evening, so I don't have to be present with them right now at 7 a.m. in the morning. If you think of it like, this is the only time I'm going to see my significant other during this quote day, during this 6 hour block that I'm looking at as my day, this is the one time I get to see them. I'm going to make sure to be super present. For me personally, I love this mindset because I can be more flexible with my time. So I do have time blocks in the morning, afternoons, and evenings when I work. I also make sure to add in connection, movement, focus on my health in each of these time blocks. Also, 24 hours is a really long time. It's so easy for us to think we have 12 more hours in our day, so I can wait to work out, or I can wait to accomplish this one thing. If we looked at it like, I only have 6 more hours in my day, you're going to make sure to get a lot more done immediately. Productivity tip number 3, you will be familiar with this one if you listen to my episode on the 10 greatest life hacks of all time, but I want to share it again in light of productivity. And that is to change when you use the phrase, I don't have time to, with it is not my priority to. We all have the same amount of time, and we all have the same amount of time every single day. Time is not actually the issue. It is how we prioritize that time that often dictates what we do and don't get done. I think that not being honest with ourselves about that is often what holds us back and prevents us from making change, because we keep thinking we're not in control of our time, or the problem with not accomplishing more is because this thing that we can't control. But it's actually about your priorities, which you do control. So, for example, when you find yourself saying, I don't have time to work out today, stop, take a moment, and change that wording to, it is not my priority to work out today. That is totally fine. There are many days where working out is not my priority. It's more my priority to rest, or it's my priority to get a lot of work done, but you're just being more honest with yourself. If it does not feel true for you, if you find yourself saying, I don't have time to take care of myself, and then change that to, it is not my priority to take care of myself, and that feels like that's not right, that's not aligned with my values, then that means your priorities are out of order and you need to make some changes. When it comes to productivity and getting everything done that you need to, This is an essential mindset shift. I so often tell myself, I didn't have time to get that thing done today, or I didn't have time to go through my inbox, or I didn't have time to make the doctor's appointment. Like, how many times have you heard yourself say those exact same phrases? When we switch it to, it was not my priority today to get that one thing done, or it was not my priority to go through my inbox, or it was not my priority today to make my doctor's appointment. That's, first of all, more honest. That's just the truth. And it's okay when things are not your priority. My inbox is an absolute mess right now. And every night I've been going to bed being like, oh, I did not email that person back, or that person's waiting on a response to me and I didn't get to it today. And it's so frustrating when you think, I did not have time for that, as if like you're a victim of your time. So I have to remind myself that it was actually just not my priority to get to my inbox today. I had more pressing tasks and meetings that needed to be a priority for me. It was my decision to deprioritize my inbox compared to all the other things that I was dealing with. I am not a victim of my time. I made that choice. Where it really helps with productivity is when that statement doesn't feel true for you. For example, if you're like, it is not my priority to make my doctor's appointment today, or it is not my priority to work on this big project, but it feels like it should have been, that's where you know where to make some changes. You can look at where your time was spent that maybe shouldn't have been a priority. Maybe you were on TikTok for a few 1 minute breaks throughout your day, but it added up to time that you could have spent to call your doctor and schedule an appointment. Maybe you needed to cancel that weekly meeting with your team to give yourself more time to work on the big project. Productivity really just comes down to knowing the right order to prioritize. And this hack really helps me to keep my priorities in check and feel more in control of my time. Productivity tip number 4 is time batching. Part of the reason that we feel unproductive is because we are constantly being forced to multitask. Again, going back to like our brain is supposed to only focus on one thing at a time. So we are constantly going between different energies or different mindsets. For example, my brain on any given day typically has to switch between meetings, podcast interviews, creative time writing, going to events. So, in order to get into each of these different brain spaces, each of these different energies that these different tasks require of me, it kind of takes some time. I get off my game constantly having to switch between so many different like mindsets and different headspaces and different energies. So, as much as possible, I try to time batch, which means scheduling like activities together. So, use some examples from my life. Emma knows that I like to batch interviews as much as possible together. So she will try to schedule as many interviews on the same day. I also like to schedule interviews on days where I have events. And I also create content for social media on those days. So I can be my social, outward facing energy. My whole day is dedicated to being in that same headspace. Plus, my makeup's done. So I only have to spend time that week getting ready once. Whereas if everything is scattered throughout the week, that's like a good additional 45 minutes every time I have to get ready. Mondays, we already have weekly meetings, so I try to schedule my other check-ins for this day so that I can be in like meeting mode. Other days I reserve for heavy editorial work so I can zone in and concentrate on the same type of task for most of the day. I try to reserve Fridays for editing episodes so that I can be in my cocoon and really get in the zone so that I can be better at editing and stay more focused since I'm focusing on one task at a time. So this means I try not to schedule any meetings for Friday if I can help it. I try to get a lot of other work done earlier in the week, so Fridays is my editing day. Again, this is not always the case, especially when I'm working with a lot of other people's schedules. But as much as possible, I'm really conscious about looking at what I have coming up in the week and batching similar tasks together instead of just going day by day and fitting a bunch of various meetings or to dos every day. For you, this might look like scheduling all of your calls for one day of the week or doing all administrative work one day of the week. If you create content, maybe that means on Sunday you change into a bunch of different outfits and create all of your content for the whole week on Sundays. So you have it all done, you're in the mode, you're like camera ready. And then you have content to post throughout the entire week rather than taking photos or content every single day. It also doesn't have to be batching by day. For example, you could spend the last 30 minutes of your day every single day looking at your inbox rather than peeking at your inbox throughout the day. There are so many ways you can get creative and time batch for you. The point is just to be intentional about your schedule so you can save yourself time and be able to focus on and get in the headspace for one thing at a time so that you can do your best at that one thing. Productivity tip number 5 is that energy affects our output more than time. If you can't already tell, I'm big on like not focusing that much on time. I'm really big on focusing on energy. When we think of being productive or becoming successful, we typically think of how much time that we're putting in. You've probably heard the stories of the founder of the startup who sleeps in the office because they're working 24 hours a day. But a lot of us are working long hours and we're burning ourselves out and we're thinking that that's the right way to be our best and to get successful. A lot of us even brag about how busy we are. We all have that coworker where when you're like, "Hey, how are you?" And she's like, "Ugh, I'm just so swamped." And you're like, "Jan, I was just being polite, okay? No one answers how are you honestly. And also, you don't get a gold medal for being busy." We're so programmed to think that time is what affects our outcome, and that's actually not true. I'm going to say something crazy. I think time doesn't actually have a lot to do with success. I think it's all about energy. I have experienced this firsthand. So, I was also programmed to believe that success is directly correlated with putting in a lot of time. So I put a lot of hours in my career. And in 2020, I also started my own side business. So I felt like every hour that I was not spent working at the Every Girl, I needed to spend it on my business or else I did not deserve to be successful. No surprise, I got pretty burnt out. I felt like I was kind of like treading water, directionless in my career, unsure of where I was going. I felt exhausted all the time. Everything felt hard. And it wasn't until I decided I needed to take a step back, reprioritize my life and focus on my joy and my health. That is when the podcast came to be. That's when I started getting more successful and felt like I knew where I was headed and what I needed to do in my career life. It's kind of like everything clicked. It felt more effortless. I felt more inspired. I felt like I had more answers without trying so hard. I invested more in my energy, which meant I prioritized my health, my happiness first and foremost, and I got a way better output and more success while putting in less time. I want to be clear because I still work a lot of hours, but the difference is that I no longer feel guilty when I take time off or feel like I should always be doing something for work or that success directly correlates with putting in more time. I now see the big picture of my life, and I know that the only way I can possibly put in the amount of time that I do, the long hours that I do put in, is because I prioritize my energy. I can take on so much more because I invest so heavily in taking care of myself and feeling happy in my life. I work a lot of hours, but I don't think I could accomplish what I'm doing in the same amount of time without this managing of my energy. Investing in your energy means that you can do more in less time. So take care of yourself, seek out joy, tend to your relationships, live your fullest life, and I swear you will show up to work with more critical thinking skills, more creativity, more energy. You can easily accomplish more when you're focusing on managing your energy. I compare this to writer's block. So, you know, those times when you had to write an essay for school or even just an email at work and you're dealing with writer's block. You're sitting there trying to formulate words, nothing's really coming together well. You type out a sentence and then delete it because it sucks. It takes you 20 minutes to write this email or 4 hours to write a paper. It takes you so much time, and the finished product is like, subpar. Now think of the times when you're writing and you're just in that flow state. Words are pouring out of you. Maybe you wrote the most communicative, clear, effective email of your life in under 3 minutes, or maybe you wrote a paper that's A+ worthy in under an hour. We all have had this experience of writer's block and being in the flow state. So we know that time actually has nothing to do with the output. All of us, no matter what we do for work, are either existing in something comparable to writer's block or in the flow state every single day. The way you avoid this block, this stagnated energy, is not to spend more time working, but to change your energy so you can constantly exist in a flow state so that you do better work in less time. Think about the most productive work days or breakthroughs that you've ever had. They probably come after a vacation or a long weekend with friends. Maybe you had a really good night of sleep. The breakthroughs and the really productive days are not typically coming when it's been like the craziest week and you're feeling burnt out. To use another way to demonstrate this idea, when I chatted with business coach Liz Tran, That's such a great conversation, by the way. Go listen to that episode. She shares the Yerkes-Dodson law, which if you look up the Yerkes-Dodson law on Google Images, you see it's like this bell curve graph. And it's basically showing that some amount of stress or pressure is good for performance, which kind of explains why a lot of people do really good work when they procrastinated, because it's like, there's a little bit of stress. I got to get this outcome in a short amount of time. But once you deal with too much stress or you're approaching burnout, your cognitive processes shut down. You can't be creative or think critically or nail an interview or brainstorm efficiently when you're in this stressed out state. Think about being in fight or flight mode. Your body isn't thinking, now's the right time to problem solve or to be really creative. All of the energy in your body is programmed to go into running away or fighting the tiger. Your brain is literally meant to shut down when you reach burnout or too much stress. So, what all of this means, truly and honestly, the best, most effective productivity tip I have ever known, the secret to being successful, is to invest in your energy instead of spending more time. That means stop doing things that's draining your energy, like scrolling on your phone or meeting up with that toxic coworker for drinks after work or sitting at a computer for hours on end. Do things that genuinely fill up and recharge your energy. Laugh more often. Move your body, eat foods that are medicine to your brain. You will accomplish more in less time and have a much better output. If it's really hard for you to get out of that toxic productivity mindset that tells you you need to be basically reaching burnout in order to be successful, or you need to be working so many hours in a day to earn success, here's what I want you to do. Get out your favorite notebook, your favorite girly little pen, and pick one of these affirmations I'm about to recite for you. Write it down, sit with it, put them on post it notes. Okay, here we go. My worth at the company or at my work is based off of the ideas I have, the talents I offer, and energy I bring, not the time I put in. That's true even if you're paid by the hour, if you think about it, by the way. Who I am and what I believe attracts success to me, not time or stress. Rest and joy are the most productive ways I could spend my time because they help me gain clarity, creativity, abundance, and energy. If I'm sacrificing my well being or joy, I won't be able to perform my best at work. So, now I'm going to walk you through my productivity routine and how I set up my calendar. So, the first thing on Sundays, I grab my weekly planner pad. I love the Every Girl's Day Designer one. That's a really cute leopard print. And it's like the whole week on one sheet. And I write out all the big things that I have going on that week. So, like client sessions, interviews, events. Then I add in my workouts, time I need for cooking, meditations, time with friends, date nights. I even like to map out when I'm watching The Golden Bachelorette or Real Housewives, when I'm going to spend time reading. When most people plan out their week or solidify their calendar, they're only planning and adding meetings and appointments to their calendar. And then everything else gets lumped into the category of if I have time once I fulfill all of the needs of these meetings and appointments that are on my calendar. Like Tuesday will come and maybe you do a workout if you have free time, or you'll decide to get together with friends on Thursday if you have free time. It doesn't make its way to your calendar. It's kind of like what you do if you get everything on your calendar done. First of all, that term, free time, is really just a sneaky, toxic productivity term. It just means time left over after all of the important stuff is taken care of. So maybe you think of it like you have to go to work and you have to do your chores and all the other items on your to-do list. Maybe you're taking care of kids or your pets. Maybe you think of workouts as part of the important stuff, or maybe getting a workout in is only part of the bucket of that free time that you only get to if everything else is done. I try not to use that vocabulary of free time at all. I do not consider my time with friends or my wellness routines as that open chunk on the calendar, because I do not have free time. I have time where I'm interviewing guests for the podcast. I have time where I'm in meetings. I have time preparing for an episode. I have time spent working out. I have time where I'm cooking. I have time relaxing on the couch and watching Bravo. I have time laughing with friends. None of this is free time. It is all equally important. When we only add work meetings and appointments to our calendars, we're subconsciously sending a message to ourselves that this is the only category of our life that is important. Like these are the only things that we have to prepare for and show up on time for and cannot cancel. Everything else just gets whatever leftover time and energy, which is typically not a lot. I like seeing everything from my podcast interviews to when I'm watching Real Housewives on my calendar because it is all equally important to me. A workout, hanging out with friends, a meeting with my team, these are all equally important parts of my full life. For one, because working out, eating nourishing foods, laughing a lot, connecting with my boyfriend, watching Bravo, truly, I look at all of these things as important to my career because it's how I increase my energy and creativity and my mood and vivaciousness so that I'm better at my job, so that I show up to interviews as my best self, so that I can think as creatively as possible, so that I can be a good employee and a good manager. Like these are all important to the energy that I bring to work. So they are investments for my career, but also because all of these areas of my life are equally important. Having a career that I feel fulfilled by is just as important as having a healthy body and healthy mind, which is just as important as feeling happy in my relationships. All of these things are equally important in adding up to my very full life, which is why they all deserve a spot in my calendar. After I have my week planned, every day during the week, I go on a micro level day to day using a daily planner, also from the Every Girls collection with Date Designer. They're so cute. So I map out my schedule for the day as well as tasks that I have to do. We use Asana for workflow at the Every Girl. So I use that for editorial and for podcast. And then I use the tasks feature app on the iPhone, as well as my Apple Calendar to keep track of everything from client sessions to personal to do list items. So I check all of these apps first thing in the morning and then map it all out in my daily planner. I just like doing it physically written. I'm old fashioned like that. I feel like I get such a better sense of control in my day and can visualize it better or something. I know some people like to have different to do lists separating their work life and their home life, which I think is great if that's how your brain works, if that's helpful for you to keep it separate. I keep it separately in the apps, but then when I'm planning out my day and also week in my planner, I like to put it all together. I find that when people have separate to-do lists or separate calendars, some lists and some calendars get prioritized more than others. And again, these are all equally important pieces of your life. So I like looking at my planner and knowing everything I have to do today, from editorial work to podcast work to getting the oil change in my car to returning my library book or messaging a client I have. I think seeing everything at once also gives me a really good sense of my day and where I need to put my energy, who I need to be, what I need to tap into. The next important thing that I do to optimize my productivity is to take my reproductive cycle into account. Now, this may seem extra, which I get, but I'm really passionate about teaching women about this topic because I think we're not being educated on the powers that we have access to and should be utilizing. We're also doing ourselves a disservice to not look to our bodies for help. On my episode with hormonal expert Elisa Vitti, she talks about how corporate culture is set up to optimize performance for male biological rhythms, not the female and Freudian rhythm. So everything from the way that we view productivity to the 5-day work week to working 9 to 5 every day are systems set in place that is meant to serve men and disserve women. So I would go so far as to say, if you are not looking to your hormones in your work life, that is continuing the patriarchy. You know that in Barbie Land, Madam President and construction worker Barbie are cycle syncing with their jobs. If you have a reproductive cycle, your brain and body is not the same week to week or day to day. And yet we expect it to be. You know, we have the same weekly meetings, we have the same morning routines. We don't look to our hormonal patterns when we're brainstorming or networking or pitching or scheduling. I personally think a huge reason why women are feeling burnt out and unproductive, besides a lot of other things going on here, but a big reason is because we're ignoring our bodies. Now, I can't change my entire schedule or work life or to-do list, I can't make my team or other people work around my menstrual cycle, obviously, as much as I wish I could. I do joke with Emma that she's probably the only person who knows her boss's reproductive cycle as intimately as she does. So I adjust my productivity routine based on my cycle as much as possible, but not entirely. We still have, normal weekly meetings. Sometimes last minute things come up. I have to work around other people's schedules, obviously. I'm not so kooky that I'm only working based on my cycle. I more look at it as a map throughout the month to identify my strengths and weaknesses. So, for example, during follicular phase, which is the 10 days to 2 weeks after your period ends, rising estrogen boosts the brain's working memory capabilities. You also feel a lot more creative. So, this is when I'll do a lot of brainstorming. I'll look at the upcoming month and brainstorm episodes I have coming up or schedule brainstorms with my team. I also tackle more challenging assignments at this time. So I'll start a big project, launch something new. If I have articles I'm writing throughout the month, I'll try to do it around this time, even if that means working in advance. In your ovulatory phase, which is about 3 to 4 days, right around in the middle of your cycle, the hormone levels at this time increases synaptic connection, and you are wired for connection. You're wired for communication. So in my ideal world, I would schedule all my podcast interviews at this time because I will be clearer and more communicative. Or I'll set up a coffee meeting because I come off more likable and I'm better at connecting. This may also mean you schedule additional check ins or attend a networking event. Once your luteal phase begins, which is about the 10-ish days before your period starts, you won't feel as social. So I actually tried to minimize meetings starting now as much as possible. This is kind of the time where I'm like, you know what? If it could be an email, it will be. But you also feel really focused and detail oriented. So this is when I like to do a lot of administrative work, like planning out the calendar. I notice this a lot every luteal phase. I can work on a very detailed type of work, like administrative stuff for hours without getting burnt out like I would in other phases because my brain feels so focused on the details. Like I really notice a difference in luteal phase. And then the menstrual phase. This is not the time that we are going to intentionally schedule the big meeting or do an interview or start a new project if we can help it. During this phase, we're really meant to turn inward and rest. So, those are my main priorities at this time. I know I've talked about cycle syncing and how I live on my period in other areas of my life. I eat really nourishing foods. This isn't the time that I'm doing a HIIT workout or intermittent fasting. Not that I do those things a lot anyway, but wouldn't be the time that I did it. But when it comes to productivity, what's really cool is the right and left hemispheres of the brain is more connected than any other time of your cycle. So your ability to analyze is at its strongest. So maybe this is the time when you analyze data from the past month, try to find patterns. Maybe you're looking at your monthly calendar to evaluate what could be streamlined. Maybe you reflect on your schedule and your tasks from the past month and look for areas of improvement. I have found a lot of my biggest like aha moments or like this is the way to fix this workflow problem all have come because I've reflected and tried to analyze during my menstrual phase. So this is what I personally try to do. Again, it's never perfect. I still have meetings all the time. I'm currently in my late luteal phase and just in an interview and obviously doing this. So it's never perfect. It's just what I try to do. If this feels complicated to you at all, or if you can't adjust your workflow, or you don't have an active reproductive cycle, don't worry about it. The point of all this is just to rethink how you structure your work life so you're optimizing your energy instead of draining it. I think we can all afford to trust our bodies a little bit more when it comes to productivity. If you're having that 3 p.m. energy slump and can't get through the rest of the work you have to do, we're so programmed to go get a coffee and push through it and be annoyed at ourselves and feel like we were lazy. But we never ask ourselves why. We never trust that our body maybe is telling us something with that afternoon slump or that brain fog or that lack of focus and productivity. What drained our energy? What caused the afternoon slump to begin with? Was it what we had for lunch? Was it because we are on our periods and that's okay? We're not supposed to be hyper focused. So we'll have a couple days where we do the bare minimum and rest and relax and analyze and then know we'll be really productive in a couple days. Is it because you've been working so many hours, you are burnt out and your body and brain are like, give me a break and you haven't done enough that lights you up and recharges you? At the end of the day, I think real productivity, not the surface level hacks and tricks and timers, which can all be helpful tools, but I think real productivity is simply managing the energy of your entire life. I hope this episode brought you guys value. If it did, please leave a review. I feel like I've been talking to you guys for ever now, but we are still a relatively new show. So leaving a review and showing your support helps us continue to bring you this content. Occasionally get a mean review. So your nice reviews are really beneficial for my mental health. Also, share this episode with your work wives, managers, send it to your employees or professors, send it to your students because this will be the coolest homework assignment you ever give them. Thanks for listening. And to whoever needs to hear it, you are killing it. You deserve a break. And I'll see you next Tuesday.